What's the deal? Okay, you can fill out the rest of the joke in your head. Today I'm talking about boxing because I'm just a massive fan. In spite of my jest, which could apply to everything I have ever said, the topic does actually interest me, mainly because it feels like this change came out of nowhere, no one told me, everything is changing, and I hate it. But it does provide me with enough meat to create a shorter video now instead of 7 years in the future. All of this stuff has arisen mainly through Jake and Logan Paul of all people, who I wish would stop doing things. Both very recently had matches, which you may have heard about through Twitter, YouTube, or if you're as trendy as me, your parents, but boy is it comfy under this rock. Anyway, before I get carried away talking about boxing and just how cool I totally am, a word from today's sponsor, Bokksu. That was a pun. Get it? Bokksu is a monthly subscription service that delivers original and unique Japanese snacks, paired with various types of tea, right to your doorstep shipped directly from Japan. Unlike many other Japanese snack boxes that simply compile wildly commercially manufactured products from Japan, Bokksu partners with local businesses from around the country to create treats for each specific type of box. Your first box contains a variety of sweets, and every month after that adheres to a different theme. This one is kind of empty because I've eaten a lot of it. You can learn about these themes with the included booklet that not only details the type of treat, but also the ingredients and where it came from. If you want to start your subscription, head to the link below and use code Kappa20 for 20% off your first authentic Japanese snack box from Bokksu and take advantage of this limited time offer. There's 4 different plans depending on what suits you the most, with the option to pause or cancel it at any time. Also, I know some of you do this, but please don't microwave the tea, it's actually very nice. Anyway, the whole concept of celebrity boxing, whatever the hell that means, regardless of your opinion, is extremely strange, because it actually shares a lot of similarities with YouTubers making music, as it appears they get successful doing something else and then just decide that they're done with that, using their already accumulated clout. An inherently strange concept that has now been normalized by fringe groups of society and sociopaths. This whole thing started with the Logan Paul versus KSI fight, which I still haven't seen, mostly because the idea of boxing doesn't appeal to me, obviously. Gonna be honest, even with the added flavor knowing these two made a fortune, the charm of watching two grown men attack each other really wears off after your 3rd trip to South Melbourne. The reason for picking boxing as an event is pretty obvious. It is the most literal endgame to YouTube drama you could possibly make. If 2 people are fake fighting on the internet for money, why would you not also fake fight in real life for money? Looking up any statistic on any pay-per-view boxing match shows that the overall revenue from this pretty niche slice of sports is insane, since the price of most pay-per-view boxing matches are so high, there doesn't need to be a lot of people to pay to earn a massive profit. Seriously, some of the reported revenue numbers outperform the box office of high-budget movies. Depending on who you ask, how they estimate it, and if you can even believe them due to deeply seated choice. The first KSI vs Logan fight made around $11 to $16 million in revenue, with the second fight, that I completely forgot happened, most likely making more, with their minimum takeaway for that fight being close to $1 million each. Which is a lot! That's almost enough to buy this house in Footscray, which is actually real and worth 1.5 million Australian dollars. Somehow. Our housing market is garbage, and I am fucked. With that amount of money, I'm kind of surprised the concept is just now becoming more popular. I mean, their first fight was so popular, it was the biggest non-professional boxing match, which is important to someone. Their second match was an actual official amateur boxing match, not just 2 people punching each other in a ring. Now they have titles, and according to some people who know more about boxing, means that there's a lot of things that are different, which sounds like it could be true. The reason I'm making this video is obviously not because of either of those fights, because they were just more than a year apart now, but we have recently the YouTuber versus TikTok thing, Logan versus Mayweather, and only a month and a half before that, Jake versus Ben Askren, which is kind of a long time when you think about it. Imagine having a content drought for more than a month. What a dork. The Jake Paul versus Ben Askren fight does seem quite strange at first glance. Why Ben? And also, who Ben? I don't know him. Mayweather is insanely well known, but Askren on the other hand is a well-respected and accomplished UFC fighter that hasn't really been making news in the past year or 2 because he's been retired since late 2019. This is the point where the dots may start to connect for you if you're a cynical little bastard. Especially if you add the fact that He had a hip replacement several months earlier, many claiming that he was a terrible striker, and he started his career as a wrestler, which continued to be what he was known for throughout his UFC career. Now, I don't know anything about boxing. Seriously, that's not sarcastic, I know nothing. But I'm 90% certain you can't chokehold people, which may be kind of a massive flaw in his strategy. I'm not saying this to downplay Jake's win. I will say a bunch of other things to do that instead. But it does put into context why Ben Askren was the fighter chosen and why he got knocked out in round 1. None of the spectators enjoyed it, and he got paid a minimum of $500,000, which is more than half of what he earned in the final year of his career. Now, this one didn't really have anything interesting going for it except the fact that it exists, but apart from that, it's a boxing match, so I don't care. The most recent boxing match, as of recording, is the YouTuber versus TikTok thing, which I definitely knew about before I wrote this video. That's why I get paid money to do this. I'm not lying to you. The most interesting part of this fight is it just looks like a really long, multi-staged bar fight. Something of particular note that many people caught onto as it was happening was TikTok star Bryce Hall getting the shit punched out of him and his soul ejected through the back of his head. That's not unique by itself. It's a boxing match. No, what made it unique was the things that he probably shouldn't have said. Like this.
I'm gonna knock out Austin because I'm an actual fighter. I've been in probably over 40 street fights.
Yeah, he didn't win. Also, winning 40 street fights isn't that impressive. I mean, I've won street fights. I mean, come on. They were 12, but they did start it. Also, I do hope this is a complete fabrication formulated to make him seem cool online or something, which I do a lot. Because if it is true, why would you say that? I understand it apparently gives credibility, you know, if they've done something before, means they can do it again, but 40 is a big number. Like it is too big, suspiciously large. At that point, the only recurring factor is you, which means that you're such a massive asshole, people are practically tripping over themselves just to come and fight you, which is somehow a level of class below the people that star on RBT. By saying this, you are implicitly stating that you are a deeply flawed human being to the entire internet, whereas I, on the other hand, am more than comfortable explicitly stating that in my videos in exchange for money. Speaking of, the revenue for this event, much like every other one I've currently spoken of, has been exceedingly high, but not as high as they could be. I've spoken at length about one of the reasons these events are so common for creators to participate in is money. But there is a seedier underbelly to this entire situation, it's piracy. Specifically how insanely easy it is to watch these fights without paying for them. It's also extremely easy just to not watch these fights at all. I do it all the time. Now publicly, I condone piracy. Privately, I think it's fucking awesome. That was a joke. That was a meme. But it isn't difficult to see why people aren't willing to cough up the money, as some of these fights can cost upwards of $70 US. Even the cheaper ones still costing about as much as Disney's home viewing feature, which people think is already too expensive because you pay for the subscription as well. And even then, when you pay for the movie, there isn't a chance it'll just end in the first round. Personally, I do not see the appeal in spending $60 US on average to watch two sweaty men aggressively hug each other. In any of the given fights I've already mentioned, around half to 2/3 of all viewers have been estimated not to pay to watch it. For the first Logan Paul vs KSI fight, it was reported that over half of the views came just from pirated Twitch streams, which doesn't account for every other website. And honestly, as time goes on, I wouldn't really be surprised if this entire boxing event stuff and YouTubers is like just a fad or the money dries up somehow, because there have been 3 fights in a 3-month period, and any more than that would less oversaturate the market and more murder it in its sleep. Something I have neglected to mention is the companies behind these fights, the providers, like the thing that is integral to actually being able to watch it. The 2 biggest ones for my audience would be HBO Showtime and Sky Sports, but there's about a million other ones like Live X Live that did the TikTok versus YouTuber match, and Triller, whatever the fuck that even is. It's no secret that piracy has been somewhat resurging very recently, because the main thing that quelled it was the mainstream introduction of streaming services like Netflix, because all of a sudden Everything you wanted to watch was on one platform without having to worry about download times. Unfortunately, there's now, officially, way too many of them, and content licenses just randomly disappear and then come back 3 months later, while also missing entire seasons, while certain platforms requiring a premium payment to watch recently released movies on top of the subscription you already pay, making what was once the easiest solution now basically impossible to use. I wouldn't be surprised if this is where pay-per-view boxing platforms are going. It's already impossible to find out how to actually pay for it. I mean, the Mayweather fight has this lovely table on its Wikipedia page showing how to watch the fight in each country, and you may notice that almost every country in the world is not listed. The benefits of having a local provider is that it's probably going to be cheaper than a flat conversion rate, which is what you would pay on Fanmio, who is the only worldwide provider. For me, it would cost about $15 more than what I would never pay on Foxtel because it is a terrible platform. But certain countries in the European Union that have single-digit euro minimum wages get completely fucked, because while they may have a high standard of living and the euro may have a strong purchasing power in their country, it doesn't transfer well to the US dollar, meaning that you could have like 80-hour work schedules just to pay for a boxing match. No thanks. And the fact it's not actually hard to find pirated streams makes them like the first point of consumption for an astonishing amount of people, which is a massive issue for providers, more so than traditional forms of media because their margins are surprisingly thin. If a film does poorly on its initial screening or is heavily pirated, there are still multiple ways for people who lost money to recoup some of the losses, or even eventually make a profit, whether that be physical sales, streaming rights, merchandising, re-releases, limited time theater runs, special features, etc. Scott Pilgrim, The Big Lebowski, Donnie Darko, Blade Runner, and the original Willy Wonka all famously performed poorly upon their initial release, but went on to make a substantial amount of money from home video releases, sometimes even more than they did in the cinemas, to the point where all of them either have already or are getting a 4K Blu-ray release, which is a hefty commitment because those are really fucking expensive to make, but it shows that these movies are still making money. On the other hand, if a provider for a pay-per-view boxing match doesn't make their money back, they can... And that's it. That's not entirely true. They can threaten to sue a bunch of people who viewed the streams illegally for like $150,000 or something, as is what Triller threatened to do after the Jake vs. Ben Askren fight, leading people to believe that they probably didn't make a whole lot of profit, if any at all. Although I should state, those are just the ramblings of Reddit comments. I wouldn't know anything about that. I can't even count that high. Thankfully though, they said they wouldn't pursue over 2 million people, which is definitely feasible as long as each person pays the full amount before June 1st, which already passed a while ago, and I don't think anything has happened. The whole statement is astounding, and I genuinely recommend reading it just for fun. Triller's head of piracy, Matt St. Clair, pulls the classic phrases out of the hat, like, it's just as bad as stealing. Like he's reading a transcript from an early 2000s piracy PSA, as it makes no sense because piracy is not as bad as stealing, because they're not the same thing. Obviously, here I can prove it. Look, they're spelt different. Furthermore, stealing removes somebody else's ability to legally purchase that item. Piracy does not. They are still both bad things to do, but don't lie to me. It doesn't work. I'm not 5. I'm 9. He also said that VPNs have to comply and turn over all the real IP addresses of the people who viewed the stream, which, despite being a single sentence, has 2 major flaws in it. The first being that quite a few large VPN services do not store IP addresses even in the short term, and secondly, they don't have to do anything. I'm certainly the first person who has ever said this, but Triller is not the government. Although my favourite thing about this strange tactic was it's not based off anything. You may have noticed if you read it that there's a lack of anything specific being cited. It's basically just the United States law. The one that yeah, that one? Yeah. That's because, as far as I can tell, it's not technically illegal. Every step required to host an unauthorized stream is illegal because it counts as a public performance of copyrighted material. Just not the watching it part. As long as you aren't making a copy and you aren't showing it publicly, instead just watching it in your own home, technically the courts side with you over companies, which happens like once every 7 years, so like, we should be out on the streets. But honestly, celebrity boxing's probably here to stay, at least for the moment, which is a statement that I have said. As you may have gathered, I don't particularly have strong feelings or feelings in general towards the sport. I'm just as apathetic towards the idea of it becoming the only televised sport as I would be if every boxing ring on Earth was shot into space. I have nothing else really to say. Thanks to the fellas, obviously. Names that are scrolling, you'll already know the gist. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.